Hi guys, this is Dr. Scott Young with Derek Johnson today, and so we're going to share with you a lot of fun little things. I got some PowerPoints on here that's going to talk about current intel on the great currency reset inside of NESARA. Coming right up. So what's going on in your life, man?
Oh well, hunting season's over, so it's back to the real world now. So that's what I tell people. But now it's great. Get to relax a little bit from December, January a little bit, and but I didn't get to relax too much because my book. Uh, I decided to release my book right in the middle of hunting season.
Yeah, and that just dropped out here with that too. I'll show it up here on the screen, by the way, guys, so you can kind of say something about that.
Yeah. So it's been a blessing. I mean, it's I just took the documents basically that everybody knew, and that's still up for people who can't afford a book. I understand, where we are right now, and it's just for people who can and kind of want to see a chronological order from all the laws and orders that President Trump put into place himself, but also what he used from years past with the generals to be able to pull off this. And of course, it has forwards by two great people, and there's going to be some additions on the set because it's got to have a finale because I had to cut off somewhere because this isn't over yet. But it's got two great additions right now by Lieutenant Colonel Bosey, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Australian Forces Special Operations, and then also
Is that Richard Bosey kind of thing? Is that who it is?
say that again.
Is it Richard Bosey or?
That's him.
Yeah, okay,
That's
right.
him. Yeah, I can't call him that. He'll make me do push-ups for life. So, and then it's Ricardo, I believe. So it's
Ricardo. Oh, right.
for
Sorry.
Australian purposes. But yeah, so and then full bird colonel retired former deputy commander of Delta Force, Colonel Charles, also known as Chuck Sellers. So, and then I'll have some additions on the end of it by Major Jim O'Connor, who's now bishop, very intelligent man. Went to West Point, and got a few other colonels interested in hopping on. And then also, of course, I'm going to get Brad Wozniak, Canadian veteran, AJ Roberts, British veteran. I'm going to get a lot of different veterans to hop on and write their pieces in there. That way we can get as many stories as we can in there by those guys, their personal stories, but also, how we all tie in and how tie this together with the military.
Right.
So,
Something I know, and I'm going to make this comment too. There are bunches of people who are faking Derek as they're faking me on Telegram and TikTok. One person told me, like, there's this one's faking. And I finally, I've been telling people stop with the QFS crypto and all these other whatever fakes going on TikTok one day, 250 different Dr. Scott Youngs. And there's just a million of every single one of these. And you guys got to understand, we're not going to contact you just for the heck of it to sell you something.
we don't have time. First off, it's like, and I don't mean that about. I would love to talk to everybody personally. I would, as far as a personal level,
Sure.
get to meet you, get to know you, but not like that. And I can assure you right now, since we're bringing that up, that if anybody should be talking QFS as far as the details, it's this guy right here. It ain't me. That's the funniest one is they got me out there talking about the QFS and the like buy gold and silver, and I'm like, look, I understand it from just your basic legislation principles. That's not one I've nosedived a whole lot as far as the details like you have. But I'm like, if you want to be talking to anybody, it will be you, not me on that. As far as what do you think I should do? Yada yada yada, like that. Don't be coming to me about that. So I can assure you that it's not me messaging either about that.
Exactly.
But we don't have time just because of the fact that that's what I try to tell people. By the time you and I get to take time out to read and study, our personal time too, personal reading, but then also professional reading. The time we do all that, our structures are so, it's so tight, our schedules, that even our families are they're being neglected in certain ways, and they also understand what we're doing. But at the same time, I'll speak for you, and then you can, we'll bounce and speak for me.
Oh,
But
it's true. I mean, I would just say one of the funniest parts is that, I mean, while some of them will type their messages back and forth, every once in a while you'll get on the phone with someone and the guy's got like an Indian accent. I'm going, you can listen to me, so you should have no, that doesn't sound like Scott. That doesn't sound like Derek or Michelle Moore or pick the person. I'm like, stop, So yeah.
you can definitely tell me, or at least people should, if it don't sound like Forrest Gump, you're
I know
run.
it's not that hard to figure out, but don't go and buy that stuff. Okay, I know you. I know
Yeah.
you respect Eric, and I know you respect me, and many people. But the reality is, don't go and buy that stupid stuff. If you want to get something, he's got it up on the screen right here. Rattletraps1776.com. You can kind of see a lot of the documentation, some background stuff, his music, and you can also see the book. And you can go directly to that. And there's a way to contact him through there. And you might not be able to talk to him that way, but you can at least share your message or conversation with that too. So that's just my little initial rant point there. But I wanted to bring this up here, so I'm going to kind of bring it up on the screen so people can kind of watch like the little chapter parts. But you mentioned, I think it was last week or so, on the official site of the Currency Reset and the QFS. And I'm going to throw it out here. So that's the basic question, and we're going to have you explain that here. But I'm going to bring it up on stage here, and you can kind of talk a little bit about that. I mean, just what you had said there with that.
Yeah. So like I said, I danced around a little bit just to show people. I had some comments in the early days about, prove it, show where it says that, things of that nature. And, what I do is take the general synopsis. I always tell people, first off, the first thing is, if you're frustrated, tired, angry, mad, bitter, sad, whatever you are out there, those are feelings. And those, God don't work on feelings like that. God, if we went to God one day and God went, oh, I'm having a bad day, sorry, I'm in my feelings, we'd be in trouble. So I show people, first off, the big picture is a military occupation, which is the law war manual, and then your federal continuity directives, which are your continuity of operations that's taking place. And so all this falls under it. This is one of the key components, though, because I mean, what we're going to get into on this show, because we talked about it in the pre-show, we'll get into it further in depth, but it's the financial system of what we establish. And so, it affects all our lives. It don't matter what you look like, where you come from. If you're an American, all this affects all of us. So it's always humorous for me when someone says, prove it. Well, okay, I will, because I know where to find it. I give the receipts. So when you go to the office of the comptroller, you can go to OC, just type in occ.gov on Google, and you go to the office of the comptroller of the currency. All right. And that's where you'll find all this information here. That is an example letter. When you find that actual alert, the alert -3 and alert -4, it'll show a little write up, and then you click on it and it sends you to that. And it's
Look at
basically
the date, guys. Look at the date here. It's June of 2020.
which is
And
very, very, very key date there, because when you look at, then that's how this all ties in. So when you look at when Donald Trump would have become a wartime president by visualization, he was already under military occupation. All right. And what proves military occupation is a capitulation tour. When he went to the Forbidden City of China, when he went to North Korea, when he went to Saudi Arabia, Argentina, all these countries that submitted to him. All right. That's what's called a capitulation. You'll find that in the Law of War Manual. All right. So you got it, and that's a long read, but go to chapter 11 and it'll save you a little bit of time. But go to chapter 11 and read all of chapter 11 on the Law of War Manual. All right. So that proves that. then when you look at the visualization, so if you're awake, like Dr. Scott and I, we call awake. If you're just now hearing this, awake means you know the legislation, you know it pretty fluid. You just see it kind of like a scroll in your mind, like we do. Then awake means you know the legislation over here, and then you can see a visualization and know, oh, that pairs with this law, or that pairs with this order. That so for those that don't know that, Donald Trump would have had to been, so there's 90%, I would say 90, it may be more than that, but I'll just go with the conservative 90% of America still have no clue what's going on. The average everyday American, not knocking them because they're working, they're scathing, they're scraping by because of this crap system we've been under for hundreds of years. All right. But the average American have no clue. So they had to see this play out a certain way. So for all of you that are here listening, you're awake, give yourself a pat on the back. But that June date is key because Donald Trump put in the War Powers Resolution Act. All right. They amended that. All right. That means Congress, they amended that act. All right. Meaning they declared something in there. And I can tell you right now, no war has been officially declared since 1942. So the word declared can also be misconstrued out there. We have not declared an official. Korea wasn't declared.
Absolutely
Vietnam
not.
wasn't declared. Iraq wasn't declared. Panama, all the places we've been were never declared. All right. So you got to know that as well. But in that War Powers Act is where the president can send troops into hostilities, war, anything of that nature. All right. Section 1550 was not there until Donald Trump put it there. All right. And it said in that clause, in the first 180 days, this needs to happen. And it's a report to the defense committees and to the Congress. And then when a president does send troops into hostilities, he has 48 hours to report that to Congress. Well, guess what? Congress wouldn't have put that in the War Powers Resolution Act if Congress didn't sign off on that.
Right.
All right. So Congress did sign off on that. That's why it's in the War Powers Act, Section 1550. So in that first 180 days, that June date is in that. All right, would be in that. June 17th is
16th actually. Right
June
here.
the 17th will be the actual end of that date. If you go from December the 20th, 2019, it would put you at June. I believe it was June 17th would be the first 6 months to the T. All right, so that if that says June 16th, I mean you can't even get. Now, what people will discover, though, that is an example letter that would be sent to people saying, hey, if you get one of these, don't fall for it. But they're showing you, though, what is actually taking place because they wouldn't be having to send you a warning letter or say, hey, this is what it would look like. Don't fall for this if it wasn't taking place. Right. So I've had that argument before is like, well, if it's just an example of a fraudulent letter, wouldn't that mean that they're saying that's fraud? No, they're telling you that there is a quantum financial reset. There is a quantum financial system because all the other things that pair around that, the Quantum Act, who put that there? Donald John Trump.
Right.
All right. The Quantum Initiative. All right. So is it going to be a lot of information about it right now as far as that? No, because there's still, this is all relatively new and they're implementing it, which is what the actual Federal Continuity Directive number 2 is called, the implementation phase of the first one. So all that right there shows you when it tells you right there, it says about the quantum financial and the global reset, but then NAFTA, right? Donald Trump, that was one of his prize things was to end NAFTA and establish the USMCA. And when did he do that? He also did that in June of 2020.
And that's really important because what NAFTA was trying to do is bring in Mexico, America, USA, and Canada together as like a conglomerate. And what they were trying to do is a globalization. I want to throw this in here. It was a globalization effort to make like here's in essence kingdom instead of having sovereign organizations, which some unfortunate NESARA people, when they talk about it, They're going, well, like, Australia is going to be a part of the United States or Canada is going to be a part. No, this is trying to say we need each country to have her own sovereign situation. And I think that's super important on NAFTA or
Yeah,
killing NAFTA.
yeah, I agree with that. And President Trump said that. When he says America first, he doesn't mean that America and the heck with everybody else.
Right.
He's saying that America first, Americans, hey, Americans, America, let's look at America. Australians, if you're an Australian, like Lieutenant Colonel Bosey talks about all the time down there, hey, Australians, we can thankful America, thank you, but hey, everybody for their own. And then once we establish all those, once every country gets everything under control, then we can start to look out again at international trade and
Right.
things of that nature, right? So that's why it's called a reset, and it's not bad, ladies and gentlemen. It's not going to hurt you. It's not it. We're going to talk about that.
By the way, one of the things that people get all upset about is they, kind of put NESARA as the mark of the beast, and this is one of my books that I wrote on, and I've written on other things, but what they're struggling with is they hear like central bank digital currencies or CBDCs, which is a feature of the Fed. But when you realize, do you know that Trump actually has recently talked about it, and Congress has actually Cruz brought this up in Senate, excuse me. And so now you're seeing this come out. Why? It's because we're coming to the end of the war. You don't set the financial system until the war part that Derek talks about is done. So when you see that this part on the horizon with it too.
Well, and that's the other thing is, the mark of the beast for the Christian folks out there, that's a whole other topic to nosedive anyways. And you need to nosedive that with people who are well read and studied in Hebrew origin of Christ. And I'm not knocking. I know a lot of preachers. I do. I'm a Southern dude, deep South. I know a lot of preachers. But they're not as savvy with the Hebrew origin. The one that I know that is brilliant with it, he'll put you to sleep in 10 minutes. All right. Because if you're not interested in knowing that, it's going to say you got to do like what I've done with the laws and orders. And you're just like, it's kind of like that. It's also like that game that used to be on that game show where you had to run around in the grocery store and they gave you a list. It's like that, and so that whole mark of the beast thing, like, ladies and gentlemen, we still control that because God gave us free will. God gave all of us, each and every one of us we have a soul, right? We have a mind, and we control. And that's what President Trump's been talking about a lot, is that we're going to decimate street crime by 75 and 85%.
Yes.
So we control that. We have to maintain that though, right? See, God gave us free will. He gave us the will in a domain to even take care of the animals and things of that nature, farm. And the Bible tells you to drink, marry, and be happy, right? It tells you to live your life. It doesn't say anything about fearing any of this. And then the other thing I've been separating is, once again, the gold-backed digital currency has nothing to do with the CBDC whatsoever, has nothing to do with the central bank. And that's been clear because when you read about the gold-backed digital currency, what little bit you can, it never mentions about the CBDC unless it says, well, the feds have been talking about this and that, but they're not together. They're separate. All right. And especially Texas. Texas is the state that's the state to watch and what's going on because, well, what's going on down there? Well, first off, you always got to listen to President Trump.
Right.
I've been taking heat for this, and that's fine. I'll keep taking it because I listen to him. I don't hear him. I listen to him. But what's been going on down in Texas is very key. When Donald Trump gets up and he talks, he'll say he's got the average American hanging on what a speechwriter did right here. And
right.
When the average American is processing this great little line he just said, or processing it going, yeah, whatever they're doing, right? When they're processing that and saying that, instantly he puts a central casting right behind it. And they never hear that. And they just skip right over it to the next great line that the speechwriter put. But every time he talks about the border, he always mentions something to do with central casting, which means, ladies and gentlemen, the border, if you're awake, you shouldn't worry about the border. When he says that, he's trying to get all the people who still have no clue or don't care, rather, or thought they didn't care. He's trying to get them to wake up and go, hey, it's a policy issue. He just mentioned in his speech again the other day about Title 42 again, right? So Title 42 is one of those key things to go back into of 2020 and bring it up to when they said Biden was going to terminate it. Biden didn't terminate that. Congress did. All right. So that should show you that as well. Also back in 2020, Donald Trump did what? I hate calling him that because I feel like I'm being disrespectful, but CIC Trump. What did CIC to Trump? What did he do? He gave the state governors control of their states way back then. But he also did that to see what governors were going to comply with the new laws and the new orders as well. So there's a lot of play-ons with that for all of us that are awake, right? Well, what did Governor Abbott, what did he just say recently? He said a bunch of things, but he said about the suspension clause. He mentioned the suspension of the Constitution. All right, that's very key. That's in the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. It's called the suspension clause. All right, when there's a rebellion or invasion, they can suspend the Constitution. What has the media been hammering President Trump about? What did the girl in the CNN town hall meeting? Everybody got riled up about how rude she was, and no one was listening once again. You let your emotions control you. You can't do that. You got to listen. There's a lot of, they just lace it in there. It's like filleting a fish. I mean, it's just like, choop, choop, you know. So they talked about what? They talked about, oh, she said, you said you were going to suspend the Constitution. He said, I never said that. He never said he was going to, right, ladies and gentlemen. They said if they have to, it's all to show you the powers of the president and the power that you'll hear people out there say the Constitution doesn't say that. They know anything about the Constitution than I know about a Ford Ranger truck manual. I have no clue what that, because I don't read it, because I don't drive a Ford Ranger, right? So it's one of those things. So what did Texas do recently? The Texas Guard. A lot of people don't even know Texas has their own National Guard. Their own. It's called the Texas Guard. The Texas Guard put a flag up on their headquarters. Come and take it. And they told the Federal Border Patrol, if you get near this border, we'll arrest you. We'll take you out. So, ladies and gentlemen, they're showing you who's in full control. Because if the old school federal corporation was still in control, that wouldn't be happening. All right. So
and I think that what you're saying there, by the way, I want to kind of throw this out at you. I mean, this is something I'm working on right now with another guy named Dr. Jeff Swanson. I mean, that's my baby right there. This is just one of the things I have out there is an end time kind of thing. It'll be a poster. And we're just trying to finish. This is the perception. You know, I've done this stuff. Like that's my baby. I kind of say to people, and I'll say this basically, and it's not out yet, but it'll be on the website. But the point I always say to people is, listen, you know, I had one pastor say to me, he goes, well, haven't you read Revelation 13:18? You know, it says, yes. If anyone has wisdom, let him calculate the number of the beast. It's the number of man. His number is 666. But you have to read Revelation 1 or Revelation 13, verse 1, which you have the Antichrist, then you have the false prophet, then you have the image of the beast before you get the mark of the beast. The cabal tried to like hijack the order in essence. And that's why we are here with that too. But I also want to throw this out at you guys too. And going back into what Derek, you know, beautifully brought up here, and I want to show you something fascinating. So when we're talking about June 17, right, of 2020, that is just after the first CARES Act came out that no one pays any attention to, and it's not really worth a huge amount to pay attention to. But the second CARES Act that comes out in April is the part where they killed the Fed. And that's where we have the PPP loans coming out, and we see that the Treasury is putting on top of the Fed. And this time frame is after the third CARES Act comes out. And so what Derek's kind of sharing with you here is that they're already telling you back in 2020, middle of 2020, that this thing is going on. And so that's kind of why he was bringing this up here and bringing up into this area here, that you guys can really look at it. I would say it's marrying together the military part of the conflict to the financial part of this conflict with it too.
Well, it's a massive level complex. I mean, it is. I mean, and that's why everybody's skilled with what they do and what they study. Like you, and I always tell people, don't ask me about QFS. Go watch Dr. Scott. That's just, it's not that I don't care. It's just that, you have to nosedive, and you have to be, one, you have to be skilled. You have to have the experience. You have to have the wisdom. And there's a lot of people out there that think they are, and they're not knocking them. I mean, it's just like anything. It's like songwriters. I mean, everybody in Nashville thinks they're a songwriter now. And they're not, based on certain standards, because if they were, a lot more people would listen in different manners. So, or you reveal the secrets of that dirty system, right? But it's like the whole, like that right there. The USMCA, he says that in every speech. He brings it up somehow, somewhere, some way, and maybe not every speech, but he's been saying that again. I brought to you the USMCA. All right. Well, Mexico and Canada have been in and out of the U.S. There was a Mexican aircraft coming in last night to the U.S. I show people too, Biden. All right. I've been showing people about Biden. All right. Biden, first off, if you look at Obama, well, let's just hang President Trump over here, because he is always the key. Well, look at Obama and Bush and Clinton. Look at technology, when technology started getting great. All right, internet, things of that nature. They were on TV all the time. We're not talking about clips. I'm not talking about clips of them. We're talking about them. It showed them what they were doing, playing golf, doing these things. Biden stuff is so scripted. It's like it takes a week or two before they show them again. And then that's one little thing. That's one little thing. Then you take the Democratic convention. All right. 75 or 80% of Democratic voters say they want someone new. So why is the Democratic convention hanging with Biden? I mean, think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Little things like that for the, just if you're struggling with the in-depths of this, when you look at little things like that. All right. Of course, the three cannons is where I hang my hat on, the three cannons on January the 20th, which is the funeral service. But other than that, when you get into the in-depths of this stuff right here, like the quantum financial and then the USMCA, you nosedive all this. You can't have one without the other, with the military occupation, and also the continuity of operations, just like the federal continuity directives. These tie into that as well to show you, like, the most recent publication under the two umbrella federal continuity directives was December 2023. All right. It's all about Executive Order 13961, which is the Federal Mission Resilience Strategy of Donald Trump's on December the 7th, 2020. Every one of these dates are on key dates in history. All right. It's amazing how they put them on key dates in history. Okay, so the December the 7th, Pearl Harbor 2020. So that was already after he had declared all these other things, right? So that one resilient strategy is the new publication. And you scroll down to the references, right? Thankfully, in my book, you don't have to scroll anywhere. I put the references right up under everything because I'm like that. I'm one of those that don't want to scroll all the way down. But if you scroll all the way down in the new publication of the continuity directive, the most recent anything in it was from 2022, had nothing to do with Biden. It was a whole other organization. Not one single piece of legislation. Not once. Joe Biden, All right. He has not one single piece of legislation, anything in any of the continuity of operations plans, but especially from 2021 to 2023, ladies and gentlemen.
Right,
So
and I think that's where I want y'all to see too, guys, is that so the and Derek's bringing this up. So the QFS is there. It's there in the system. It was there for the ability for you to start getting an idea. And people say to me all the time, "Well, it's not in the governmental systems." But let's throw you this one. This just came out today, so I'm going to throw this at people, and I'll read it forward. And my comments are on the right. But basically, this is the first article in the 10th section of the Constitution, and it stipulates that basically gold and silver is the only tender for money. Now, this is one of my key elements that I say. So Trump puts this out in True Social. And it's talking about the legal tender of this. Q then tells you that gold will destroy the Fed. So here's a connector. And so what does that all mean? So what we're trying and see, and I have people that get argumentative, who don't believe in the NESARA piece, and I always walk them back to a couple little areas. Do you believe that the Fed should go down in essence? And they go, yeah. Well, do you believe that the Treasury under a real Congress should control the monetary system? They go, yeah, I love that. Okay. Do you like a gold-backed currency? And they go, yes. I go, those are the hallmarks of NESARA. And so what happens is that when you go through this kind of response here, you guys can take a screenshot if you're watching, home. But basically, Trump just put this out here. I think it was today. Yeah, it's February 26, 2024. And you go, and he's
matter of
put
fact, I can show you. That way people know. I'm on my True Social right now. I don't know if it'll zoom in, but
yeah, I didn't get it there totally. But I'll put it up on the screen. Hold on. Let me pull it up. You're pulled it up there again. And right there, it's there. He's showing that same exact thing. So I'll go backward to that. In that same thing is this spot where I just kind of screenshotted what he did. And so I'm telling you, we are such at the edge of this whole thing. And I wanted to throw something out at you because, then I want you to respond to this one. So in 1868, just after the Civil War, and the Civil War had some crazy things like my favorite spot to talk about is that Lincoln brings in the gold. He brings in, the greenback dollar, which is it's about the second or third time that they skipped over the central banking, which is the United States Bank that they kept regenerating. And he brought in a dollar that was made by a governmental agency. And we use the greenback dollar. Actually, it's part of my own old genre of conversation. Then the Civil War is over by 4 months, and John Wilkes Booth kills him. And you ask the question, why would someone kill him? I mean, as an act of revenge, do it during the war. He's already in his second presidency. The thing's over. 1868, there is a piece of legislation that floats through Congress, floats through Senate, and the president signs it in. And it's about the Constitution, and it changes the wording. And then it was fully adopted basically in 1871, but that was when it was started. And it's the part that people go, when did the corporation of America happen? And it's all they did is they took the Constitution, and I always kind of say it this way: if we're looking this direction for the Constitution when it was originally created, they wanted us to look this direction. And so instead of the Constitution for the United States, it's the Constitution of the United States. And when you say that difference of word, and Derek can go on this one, it changes everything about it. And it says the corporation is involved. Do you want to throw something out related to that part?
Well, and two, I mean, I'm not going to back down from this either, because I just find myself as a motivator too. Because we need you to be upset from the standpoint of they did this not in mine and your lifetime, right? So it's nothing that is our fault, right? It would have been our ancestors in a different manner. This is why it's ever so key to know what you can know about legislation, representatives. We said this in the pre-show. I said, I tell people all the time, the key word of representative is represent. They represent us. All right. We already pay Congress. Why is my dad in Alabama get a freaking letter from a congressman in Colorado wanting money? All right. They already get paid, first off. All right. They already get paid $175,000 a year. All right. So, and that's their job. That is their sole job, is to go to DC on that 175. All right. So how are all these senators worth millions? Now, I'm all right with someone being worth millions if they work for it and they got it. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's the American dream. We all want to be rich, filthy, all this other. Everybody does. Anybody who says, "Look at Donald Trump," excuse me, would you not like to have a brand new truck in your drive car, whatever it is? Don't be that person, ladies and gentlemen. So, what I do with all that is say, Congress, right? They established a system that was for them, and the people started I hear it all. I've heard it my whole life. If I'm 41 years old and I've heard it, I know anybody over me has definitely heard it. You've heard people say, that's Congress's job. Well, I'll just let Congress do that. That's what they get paid to do. That is why we're in the situation we're in, is because people quit being you and I, going, hey, like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I mean, here's one of the most iconic actors of all time in a movie called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, playing the part of a congressman who wanted to break down every bill and all the other. Hey, Sonny, boy, that ain't how we do that up here. We take them all, we put them all together. You may get 3 one time, we get 2. And ladies and gentlemen, that was 1938. That movie was telling people this is how Congress does. So they established this system for them, right? And then they changed all the words for them, right? And lawyers do this, not all, but there's been some lawyers in the South recently who've been busted because they'd take the law and they would get people, especially people who were not educated at any standard. We're talking about people who didn't even go to, maybe not even finish high school. All right. And they'd change up just a couple of words right then, and they would explain it. And it would be a word like that. This is the Constitution for the United States, the Constitution of the United States. No one even heard that little thing in there. And it would be something like that in law, where it would say something about their land. All right. And it would just be 1 or 2 little words, but they'd sign it. And they didn't do it initially. They waited a while. But then they'd wait 5, 6 years or 10, whatever. And then, you signed this though way back here. And it says that, this land is not yours. It belongs to so-and-so.
Right.
And they would take people's land. They're busting lawyers left and right for doing that down here, especially to black people. So a lot of black people are finding out that their land was taken from them from lawyers, crooks, who changed just a couple little words in there, just a few. It's not the big words that it wouldn't be like supercalifragilistic, whatever that word. It wouldn't be like some word you go, what in the world was that? It's the little conjunctions and little things, and the grammar, the punctuation, right? So yes, you go back to 1868. That is very crucial for people to see. The 14th Amendment there is sliding in there too. All right. It was during construction. The whole U.S. was in a, distraught feeling, all these other things because of Civil War. Or you had all that, chaos, things of that nature. So you have the Congress coming in here doing that. 1871, I mean, that's just 6 years after 1865. All right. And then you have 1878 was when it was actually stamped in that we are a federal corporation, the Organic Act of 1878. Then 1913, the Reserve. And then my thing I've been harping on for sure, because this is in my mom and dad's lifetime, is 1941, the First and Second War Powers Act, which gave the president more power to do with the troops. All right, that was Roosevelt. Then you move to 61, I skipped for a reason. I skipped 51 for a reason. But moved to 61. You had Eisenhower in his famous farewell speech. And he was talking about the military-industrial complex, right? But he was also not only talking about the military, but he also harped on, he said a little bit about medical. He was talking about medical, right? How he didn't like where it was going because of this. And Donald John Trump proved to the whole world, but especially Americans, that you don't need a corporate war to fund our military, which also ties into this financial we're talking about. All right, Donald Trump never started one war with any foreign nation, and he had the $786 billion defense budget. All right, most ever, and it paid soldiers more. And he proved to the world, because once again, we the people, we establish this system. We run this system. We deem that system. Like we were joking in the pre-show. I said, look, and we'll get into that. The value. Who put the value in a dollar? Right. When I went to my MBA, the first class in my MBA at Colorado State University, the first class, the professor holds up a $1 bill, and he goes just like that. What is this? And there's answers, flying everywhere. But my buddy, one of my buddies, Ty, he is one of the most smart but awesome dudes you'll ever meet in your life. I love him for that reason. But he was in the financial side of Wells Fargo, and the professors used to give him grief because that's when Wells Fargo was going through all their stuff. And he was like, that's not my side of the company, but he did. He was like, control. That was a key word, control. Right. And people need to know that we deem that. But if we in the South all of a sudden said, hey, the heck with that dollar, we're just going to flake off tree bark off the pine tree. Well, I'm a billionaire, baby, because I'm looking out my window right now, and there's billions of dollars in my backyard. All right. So when you tie all that in and you look at the system that we established, and you look at the 1860s, the 1870s, what else was established in the 1870s? The bar, right? The bar, right? Oh, yeah. Not the kind of bars that other people are thinking of right now. No, the bar, British Accreditation Registry, 1870s. The bars were established in the U.S. All right. So
let me jump in there, because what you just did is a really powerful statement, because inside of what we're doing with the QFS, and basically over here when we were talking about, the NESARA thing, is that what you're introducing. There's three main problems. We got the gold-backed currency that has no value. I use ketchup packs. He's using bark on a tree. It doesn't matter as long as it's an accepted, allowed point of utilizing credit. So we're talking about a transfer of money from one to another. Okay. And then you have the secondary point that he's bringing up with this, is that they keep changing definitions points. And lastly, he's bringing up the British Accreditation Registry. Why do the Brits get to come in and tell lawyers what to do? It's for this change over, because we don't like what that says, and we want it to be something different. And by the way, do you know that NESARA actually talks about killing off the bar and retraining people in constitutional based mechanics of how we should be doing this stuff? Because one of the things I always say this all the time, instead of Derek and I arguing on the 14th Amendment, which we could do that in court of law, we argue upon precedent. So Derek might bring up as lawyer A, he says, well, in 1976, Judge XYZ had the precedent to answer on that case. And then Scott goes, well, yeah, but 1984, he answered on this one. And now we're arguing a precedent of a judge, instead of saying, yeah, but what if their interpretations were full on wrong? And the answer is they all are. And we're going back into what constitutional law is, and no more precedent, so that they don't hold this stuff over you. So,
and the other thing too is that when you look at 1941, 61, then back up to 51, President Trump's been harping on this big time. He said, when I'm back as president, because there's certain things you can do as president, ladies and gentlemen, you can't do as commander in chief, and
Right.
vice versa. Right. So when he says that, he's not alluding to, oh, well, you're wrong, Derek. He's not president anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, the Supreme Court separated certain things in 2016 with the Military Justice Act, and then presidential emergency action documents can extend his power as president. But because we're in a military occupation, he'd be acting as a commander in chief, not so much as a president. So, but that's another topic. But 1951, President Trump's been talking that he said, when I'm president, I'm going to put term limits on Congress. Now, why did Congress put term limits on the president in 1951, but not on themselves? See, so that should show everybody how that 1870s went a little bit deeper into the swamp in 1951 because of what had happened in 41. They didn't like Roosevelt. They didn't like Roosevelt telling Congress. He didn't ask them. He told Congress, if you don't do something about this, I will. And who you think the military is going to listen to? You think the military is going to listen to you, to Congress, or me, the commander in chief? Which one do you think? See, and when you see the military, ladies and gentlemen, we ain't talking about, your cousin who was a private first class or a sergeant major. No, we're talking about the generals. Who are the generals going to listen to? All right. And that's the key thing is that we're in a time, thank God, that there are people like Donald John Trump and all these generals, men and women. It's not just a bunch of men, hoity-toity, all that stuff. No. Thank God we got people in these positions up here who are answering to the call, just like Dr. Scott and I are doing on the levels that God put us at, and they know who the swamp is. And President Trump's told you over and over and over. He was like, it was very, very deep, deeper than you can ever imagine. All right.
Which is why it's taken so long. I mean, which is part of what it's. I always say this, guys, we're in the middle of a war. I mean, I would love to tell you X date, and Derek would love to say that too.
Me too.
But there's like the Scott word is there's 10 people that know the date, and I'm not one of them. Whether or not
the other thing is, why we even have to be here? How about let's not even be here? How about let's not get here? Right. And see, that's the thing is all of us are here because of the actions by others years ago that are dead and gone. Now we're dealing with it. All right. And some of us know what to do with that. And some of us are like, look, you're being controlled by a system that was established way back here it became corrupt. And your whole life still revolves around this. So we're showing you how to make that dollar more worth the dollar than right now. The dollar's worth about 10 cents, right? Maybe not even that. But we're trying to show you that, hey, we're in control of that. And this is a reset. We're not using weapons. I don't think we're going to have to. Thank goodness. So this is our weapon, and this is your weapon. These things not here. Your Department of Education, as I call it, and then your First Amendment. But I tell people, if your First Amendment doesn't align with that Constitution, then you're doing exactly what Marbury versus Madison, that case in 1803 was about. I mean, here's a founding father. I mean, you think about this. So the Constitution was established 1787. It wasn't enacted, though, and put into action until 1789. And 14 years later, we have a founding father having to go into the Supreme Court to clarify what a law looked like. Just to clarify what a law was, basically. Not what was on the paper, but if a law, it says any statute that looks like a law that doesn't support the Constitution is null and void. So think about all the null and void stuff we have on paper, like you were just saying. We have a law that'll be back in like 17. Well, we'll do it like 1917. And I'll be like, well, my lawyer being, well, it says right here, so Dr. Scott's over here arguing something in 1984, but we say not. It was a judgment by a judge in two different eras. All right. And both of those may have been wrong versus the Constitution.
Correct.
That's what we're saying.
And I think when we start to see, it's about the elections, and I can't really say that on YouTube that much, but it's about that. It's about the fraud nature of that. It's about the nature of dealing with a legal situation, and we're talking also about the executive orders. We're trying to do it legally. And we're also dealing with stuff in the world court, which is part of the NESARA BRICS information, that you have to have the world court getting involved with this too. And which means you have to be in control of all those things, and you have to do it legally with that too. And I think that's where that point comes in.
That's what took so long as well, though, because everything has to be done lawfully. It has to be recorded, and that way, when our great President Trump said it January 2021, he said, "Your great great grandchildren will be talking about this."
Right.
So ladies and gentlemen, he's not just talking about MAGA and oh, we had a great 4, 10 years, 12 years. No, he's talking about all the stuff you're seeing on paper, because just like the executive orders. All right. When you go to the training documents for the Army, the training docs, they call it TRADOC. But you go to that, and I have all those links up on my pages. But you can Google that TRADOC. But you have to know what you're Googling. The specific one I'm talking about. It shows how the military pairs with the federal government and what the military looks at. So executive orders, right? Well, by the president, so the commander in chief, and executive order. An order. Military works on orders. Right, and regulations, and we have our own laws in the military. But when you look at those 11 executive orders with national emergencies, and I had a great question came in a couple of weeks ago. A guy said, "Is it the executive order that expires or the national emergency?" It's the national emergency that has a 2-year clause.
Right.
And you try to explain this to people. I said, ladies and gentlemen, do you realize there's still a national emergency open from 1979, ladies and gentlemen? Then we just erase the word what an emergency is, right? That should show you the corporation in itself, that one. All right. Now, President Trump's the first president to terminate a national emergency. All right. So they're going to be terminated. All right. But those 11 that he issued, why would Joe Biden extend 11 executive orders with 11 national emergencies for 3 years in a row? They're past the 2-year clause. All right. And you can go to 50 U.S. Code, Section 1621, and read that. All right, it has to have a joint resolution by Congress or the president, both, or the president, the one who established it, terminates it. Why would Joe Biden extend the executive order 13848? I mean, but especially which we said we can't talk much about that topic, but
point, yeah.
The fraud point, right? And then you have the funding of a certain military. Cross seas. I don't know what all we can say because I get banned on Facebook for saying one word to do with a country way over there. Yeah. So, but why would he extend those? If you put Donald Trump and Joe Biden side by side, especially all of us that's known our whole life who Joe Biden is as a senator and a vice president, you put them in columns and you put their commonalities. All right. When we're not talking about like what they do outside of law and business, but you have to. The only thing you're going to get is older and white. That's it. You ain't going to get anything else. They have nothing in common. What do they have? They have nothing in common. All right.
Well, I mean, one of the things I remember studying, and I got some kind of inside information, is that in 2019, they were, I mean, the cabal, we're not talking about, Republican, Democrat. They were given Joe Biden. They were told, this is who you have to foist. And a guy who gets fifth in Massachusetts, didn't he get something like that? I mean, it's just, he's not even in his own party. And this is the most corrupt person you can come up with. I mean, we're not talking, and he was dumb. I mean, there's all
if people just go back and watch the Clarence Thomas trial and his comment there, it don't even make sense what he says at the end of it. And Clarence has a new documentary you can watch out. And they asked him that. They asked him, said, "Do you know what he said there?" And he was like, and he quoted, he said, and I quote, he said, "I still don't know what the hell he said."
Right. And I mean, but you can go back and even in the late 70s or early 80s, I can't remember exact time frame, he does a speech and it's word for word of a British speech, and on and on. I mean, he fakes, I mean, he's he's supposedly a
He's a
professor
known
here and all these
plagiarism.
other things.
He's known for plagiarism all over the place all these years. I mean, he plagiarizes, which a lot of them do.
But you gotta foist the idiocy, and you're trying to show I call it the hyperbole, the like out of bounds. You're going, is that who we're really doing? Even Italy just put up several videos with him, and he's got a mask on his head, and I'm going, do you guys get like the Matrix kind of conversation in there with that too? But I kind of want to transport us. I'm going to throw this out here because I want to do this with you, because then I want you to kind of take that one forward with it too. One of the Q posts, I think it's Q34, that talks about, and it says a real interesting way of saying it. It says EBS, and then in parentheses it says emergency action message, or EAS. What is that? Emergency action signal. Isn't that right?
Emergency alert system.
Alert signal. Yes. Okay.
Well,
so, and what, and that's not how you would write. I mean, if you were going to say EBS, you would say emergency broadcast signal. I mean, that's how you would do it if you're writing a book. I do this all the time. But what when Q was writing this kind of thing, he said EBS, and then he explains out emergency action signal. EBS was created by Kennedy. It was to override the broadcast so that they could tell people about national major emergency points. It then flipped over in the 80s, 90s, more in the 90s, to an emergency action message that was more updated to be able to get that. And then we have the EAS, which comes into the more natural state. And by the way, I'm getting them on my phone all the time. I mean, they're coming everywhere. And that can go over, the cell phone carriers to do that. So why would you bring out an emergency situation in relation to what you're talking about with the executive orders? When you were talking about the executive orders being, emergency or national emergency kind of points with that.
Well, that goes back to how are they going to, President Trump, everything that he has said no matter if you're someone of any common sense, even if you're on the opposite side of the aisle than myself, from what I've always, voted my whole life as a conservative, but anybody can go, everything that man has said has come true. When he said that, I think it was January the 13th or 11th of 2021. I have to go back and look at the actual date, but he said, that they asked that someone in the press said, does the 25th Amendment bother you? Well, first of all, people got to look at that. He only had, I think it was the 13th. He would only had a week left. Why would the 25th Amendment be of any, now? Some people say, well, if it banned him from in the future, I get that, but
why were they impeaching him back in January or earlier than that? They were, Nancy impeached him, like a second time for some crazy thing, and she didn't even put any evidence base forth, and that was like you're impeaching him like when he's already out of office, and I'm like.
So the only thing that 25th could have done was prevent him in the future. Now, but they could have done that at any time. So now they'd have still had but anyway, now that's still not the point. The point is he goes with his hands. He goes just like that. He goes, well, no, it's no concern to me, but it will come back to bite Joe Biden. Now, I'm someone who, and we all are. I think we all are guilty of this, especially if you're married or in a relationship, significant other, or whatever. We are all people of action. And I've heard that more than anybody. Actions are louder than words. All right. Now, words have power, sure, because, if someone texts you or, versus verbalizing, F you or something that hurts your feelings, you're like, ugh. Why did they do that? But it's worse in writing. But then it's also, if it's something like someone says, you can go take a hike, Well, and you're like, I don't know, whatever. Even if you were a bad person, like you cheated on them or something. But It's different. They come to your yard and key up your car, right? That's an action, right? That would hurt you. You walk outside your brand new car all keyed up. Actions speak louder than words. All right. So my thing with President Trump is from day one, and we're talking about day one off that escalator. All right. But you could really argue some of his tweets before then, even in 2014 and 2013, he was tweeting General Patton comments. And I mean, so you can really go back to right around 2012 and work your way up. Now, that's when I was kind of told that they were really starting to really plant the generals and different people.
Oh, they were.
Here.
They were.
Yeah. And so, you know, and it would have required extensive planning because of the levels. And then once again, like the military, you know, every operation, and so you have operations and you have missions under that, right? Well, every mission doesn't go exactly as planned, ladies and gentlemen. But I guarantee you one thing: if anybody knows anything about planning and replanning and planning and plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it's the military, because we learn these things called flank. Like you go this way and it don't work, and you flank around, or you pull back. There's a lot of things you can do in the military. But President Trump's words, so that 25th Amendment. Now, the other thing they showed everybody, which is very key, is on January the 20th, 2021. They had to have something that day because there's still going to be people show up to D.C. thinking there's an inauguration. So they knew that. They knew people were going to go drive to D.C. because people were Biden supporters and Democrats and liberals and fascists and socialists, and they wanted to see their boy get in. So they had to do something visually for those people, all right, because the broadcast and then what was seen that day are two different things, all right? So
two different days, by the way, 2 different days. I mean, it was filmed 2 days earlier. Right.
And the weather, you can look at the clouds and the weather. Now, you can expect that in the South one day to be, you know, you'd be sitting outside and boom, this dark cloud pops up and you're like, where'd that come from? But not this kind of stuff. You can see, but the key points to that day, it's so crucial. And I still point it out because I had a sergeant that told me, he gave me, and I say gave me permission, but I mean, this was long before I went viral. He's like, dude, you have a voice, you have a platform. I had a music platform. He was like, you need to use that for veterans and things of that nature. So I don't parade this around lightly, but this is one of our NCOs. All right. But the reason why the uniforms are important is we can joke around to a point, but then it gets serious because this is why. When they fold that flag up, that's final, ladies and gentlemen. It's no different than your loved ones. When they pass, it's final. All right. So that's final. So every uniform around Joe Biden since January 20, 2021 has been non-regulation uniforms around everywhere, around him, Harris, all of them. All right. So, you know, there's a debate out there. Do we salute vice presidents or not? Well, someone showed me an article that it's something off the public health of commission officers that said, but we salute vice presidents and foreign leaders. We never did. We only saluted the commander.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it.
Now, once again, because and whatever, but put that aside. That one thing, even if we did and I didn't know it, I've never seen that in regulations. All right, so whatever. If I'm wrong about that, great. But I'm not wrong about everything else because it's still an optic. All right, so when you look at January the 20th, he raised his right hand at 11:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is a violation of the 20th Amendment. And that's why those little words, I've had people argue this as well. Well, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. It most certainly matters. Because the 20th Amendment specifically says, it says that the president's term shall end at noon, and then, there's that key word, and then the successor shall then begin. All right? It says the successor shall then begin. That one little word matters. All right? So there's that. The reason why it also matters is let's just say this. Let's just say you had 2 guys who were dictators. We'll use men, testosterone, and then you have the polar big old Republican and a big old Democrat, super MAGA or super fascist. All right, let's say that there's 2 in 11:47 a.m. and then in that, let's just say they clash that quick. all right, and says, well, I still have power. Well, I'm the new president. You get out. That's when that nuclear football becomes that nuclear, that button we talk about. Let's just say there was someone that crazy to do something like that. All right. That's why it's important, because a peaceful transition, a peaceful transfer of power. All right. The transfer of power. There was not any of that. There was no transfer of power
because Trump wasn't there.
He wasn't there. And that was an optic. That wasn't him pouting. That wasn't him being mad. That wasn't him being a jerk. That wasn't him being all these other things out there, ladies and gentlemen. And here's why. Once again, they show you all the little nuggets. Everywhere they drop it along the way, and it had to be played out this way, because if they all did it on one day, you wouldn't be able to take it. You wouldn't be able to. We wouldn't even fit all this in one day, first off. But if they said, all right, we're going to do a week where we drop all these mega bombs on everybody, you wouldn't appreciate it. So it had to be drug out like this. But the one key thing that ties that right there, that EAS, is the nuclear football. Donald John Trump left D.C. with the nuclear football. All right. The nuclear football, ladies and gentlemen, is a briefcase looking thing. All right. And inside that is the emergency alert system. Within, just a push of a button, boop, our phones, our TVs, our internet, bang, everything goes over to my fellow Americans. This is your president speaking. All right. And I'm pretty sure that Donald John Trump has a voice you'll recognize too. It won't be some, this is Johnny Five, my fellow Americans. No, it won't be. And I'm not making fun of Indian people, but we know when you call AT&T, anybody who's AT&T or Verizon, you're like, man, I need to talk to someone about my bill. And, thank you for calling AT&T. This is Johnny. So you're going to hear, my fellow Americans, this is, whatever, however you do it. I'm not great at Donald Trump, but that's what that is, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Now, the Q Post does most certainly say that. Now, the other thing that's been showing up, and my buddy Kevin watches this, and I know he loves you and whatnot, but Kevin is a buddy of mine, and it's okay to say because he's not anymore, but he was a contractor, had level clearance. He wasn't military, but he was a contractor with the E-4B, the Doomsday plane. All right, the Doomsday plane, if you went back in 2019, 2018, 2017 back, and you were to Google the Doomsday plane, the articles you would read, you'd think it's like seeing, and it's the most rare thing you'll ever see in your life, flying. All right, even in quote unquote training. All right, so why has the Doomsday plane been up weekly? All right. Also,
it's all over the place too, isn't it? It's like everywhere you can go.
Oh, it's not just that it's a base in Nebraska, and they don't fly to Ohio. There's a base over there in Ohio as well. No, it's up and all around the Great Lakes and Michigan, flying around. It goes down to Arizona. It's been overseas. The other thing is it's supposed to accompany the president everywhere he goes. All right. If they'll show Air Force One on the transponder, and they'll show the Doomsday plane on the transponder, then they should show one of them following that Air Force One everywhere. Never been around it. And I have that on screen at the same day. Air Force One was up somewhere around Kansas or Colorado. And then you got the Doomsday plane down there flying in Arizona. Ladies and gentlemen, if they'll show both of them on the transponder at the same time, then they should show them together. And they don't. And you're not going to get around it anyway. There ain't no enemy aircraft going to. People say, well, they wouldn't show that for security reasons. Ladies and gentlemen, you ain't getting around it even when you know it's coming to town. So little things like that. The E-6, it's a form of a Doomsday plane. There's one in the sky daily. There was 2 or 3 up night before last at one time. All right, so those are forms of Doomsday planes. We have all these commands up in the sky. Those are for nuclear. What's President Trump talk about all the time? He's been bringing it back up again. They said I was going to start a nuclear war when I was in, before I got in. And then he says, I'll end and I'll prevent World War III. I'll prevent a nuclear. So, I was hoping that we wouldn't have to scare the crap out of people. But then again, there's not that many. When you look at even my numbers that follow me on all my platforms, it's somewhere like 600, 700,000, somewhere in there. Whatever that is, it doesn't. but you divide that by 332 million, that's not even a half of a percent.
Yeah.
Right. So when you look at if you're awake, yes, pat yourself on the back and first off, thank God that you're awake, right? Thank God that you are at peace, or you should be at peace. But look at all the people that don't know. So look at the people that might have to be shaken. I mean, at what point are you going to care about your border? At what point are you going to care about the policies of America for Americans? All right. At what point are you going to care? So I don't know what they'll have to do to shake it up, but what have they been showing people? I brought it up. They showed Biden with it. Why would you even show the nuclear football in the first place around him? That's the stupidest thing you could do. If you talk about security and safety, you don't show the nuclear football around Biden in England, nonetheless. But it was a fake soldier. All of her uniform was all jacked up. That's the one I used in my book the most, for sure. I mean, everything was out of place. But that's also the calm they're showing people, the optics of, hey, don't forget about the nuclear football. Don't forget about who took that away with them on January the 20th, 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, just because it's way back here 2020, those laws and orders, they're still active. They're still being forwarded. They're still being extended. Just because they were back here doesn't mean a thing. It don't mean a thing. That EAS, just because of the nuclear football on January the 20th, 2021 was way back, doesn't mean a thing. They're showing it to you for a reason.
Because it's got to be it's got to be used, and I believe that when
deportation and the homeless, taking the home, that's going to take a military to take the home. Even the homeless rescue is a good thing, which the deportation is too. But if you're looking at, if you're putting those side by side, liberal, that mindset wouldn't like to. A lot of them wouldn't like the deportation. Let's just do it like that. But the taking the homeless, that's going to require a massive military to do that. That's also why all these aircraft I keep showing. People say, why does he keep showing these aircraft? Because, ladies and gentlemen, it's National Guard and reserve components. It's the Navy working with the Coast Guard. All those entities are what Donald Trump used to be able to be as a commander in chief, but as a president, especially. Right. He used the National Guard, he used the reserve components, and he used the Coast Guard working with the Navy. And he can dodge a lot of the other things. I've had people ask me about the posse comitatus and all that. So he can go around a lot of things because that doesn't apply to the National Guard. It doesn't apply to the reserve components and Coast Guard. So, he was able to dodge a lot of things because of that. So all this stuff ties in. It's a lot of stuff. But these aircraft, a lot of these are helicopters. They're in cities like Nashville and Dallas, and a lot of them were up in Pennsylvania. And they're still doing it in Pennsylvania, but early days it was in other states where, like Philadelphia, in the cities. Ladies and gentlemen, most people have never even seen the National Guard, even just driving down the road on the weekend.
And we're seeing them all over the place with that too. So that's the cool stuff. I mean, that's the stuff that should get you excited in that kind of way with that too. But I guess as we're kind of closing up here, was there anything else that you wanted to kind of address or bring up?
Well, I wanted you to do the little breakdown that you do, just for people, explaining about like when you do with a mortgage, and then how how certain people sign different things. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let you do it. But
okay. Well, I mean, again, when we talk about NESARA, I think there's a strong kinship that occurs with Derek and I in ways. Because what he's talking about is so important, and if you watch some of the stuff I have on Telegram, and you watch what he's doing, they're complementary. They're not like against each other in any way. And so the basis of NESARA is the gold-backed currency through the Treasury, and it's all based upon Donald Trump talking about one of the most basic points is the first article under the 10th Amendment. But the key that I always like to get into when we talk about this is one of the ways that they have defrauded you. And when you know defrauding is if, let's say Derek and I were in court with one another, and let's say we went to small claims court, and Derek and let's say, and he's got a guitar in the background. So let's just say he's going to pay me $2,000 for me to build a guitar. Great. But I don't really do the guitar, and he has specifications of what he wants inside that guitar and what it to look like. Then he shows on the back end, and he takes me to court because what I built him isn't even close to that, right? So it's a contractual nature between the two of it, even if it's a verbal or it's a written contract. Okay. So he takes me to court and he goes and he presents the evidence. Scott was supposed to build the guitar, and he was supposed to make it, purple or whatever on the face of it. And when the court sees it, the adjudication is between two equal individuals, not about our status or anything else. That we have a mind, and that we were writing a contract within the possibility. Now, if I said I can't build you a purple guitar, I wouldn't have started with it, and I would have said in my communications, I told him I'd never be able to build it. Okay, but if I said that I was going to build it, and that's what I was doing, and he's paid for it, Scott's at fault. Does that make sense? So when we look at on some of the most massive assets, and we'll just use the house for just a simple example. And this is actually built up in several different ways. When you look at a house, if Derek is going to buy the house and I'm the banker, right? In the past, and by the way, I've kind of mentioned this, and I will bring this up in a semi-eulogy of my father-in-law who just died yesterday. But one of the more powerful statements as an old ag banker, and I've had conversations with him. Do you know that if Derek was buying the house and I'm the banker, do you know who shows up at the closing? Real estate agents, maybe, of the seller and the buyer. They go off, and once they do their little thing, which they do that, and that part is correct. So the sell between, the buy of the house for Derek and the other seller, that is always done correctly. Just the representative between the two of them. In essence, the real estate agent, right? But as soon as Derek moves the next room over or waits an hour before that closing, in the past, the two people that showed up was the banker and Derek. And we both signed it. These are contracts, because you would be, in essence, Derek would be injuring me by not paying the bill, right? Or I would be, injuring him by not providing, whatever I needed to, the documentation or whatever that might happen. And yet what they did, and I don't know the date with this, but some time ago, more than 30 years, is that they moved away and they added another piece called the title agent. This happens in the car business too. The dealership becomes the title agent. And so they place this other dude in the middle of it that has nothing to do with the banker, and has nothing to do with Derek. And so the title company signs all these documents in place of me. What that does is it illegitimizes, I'm sorry to say that real bad word, it makes it illegitimate of the contract. And so I, in essence, defrauded that contract as that banker, because I let someone else sign that note. And that, in every court, in every city, county, state, you could argue that one, and it goes away in seconds. And who does Scott, that little banker, right? Who does Scott sell it to? I don't even own the loans. Do you know where the loans on large things are actually kept? I'll give you an example. Do you know that my loan in 2020, when I refied my house, the millionth time I've done that kind of thing, do you know who took it? Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae sent me a letter in 2020 saying, we own the loan, but don't write us a check. Send it to your mortgage company. I'm like, what the flock is this about? It was a calm in essence of saying that the Fed, and this is, by the way, in 2009, the Fed bought out Fannie Mae. And Fannie Mae is a portion of the Fed. And by the way, almost every loan out there, now there are very few, maybe minor loans, but almost every loan is actually held with the Fed, which is in violation of the 14th Amendment under the fourth section that stipulates if a foreign agency has a debt, you don't own it because it's illegal to do that. So therefore, you say, well, I owe the debt, so I should pay it. No, you were defrauded out of it. And even if the bank, even if it was done by this local bank, they added a title agent. You were defrauded in every way, and you keep getting defrauded every time they change your credit card statement, and they don't tell you that they up the rate, and they never do, right? They never change it. And then when they change addresses, they need to identify you, even if they change the addresses, which then makes it illegal. And I might say this. Do you know that a Blue Cross Blue Shield contract that I signed in 2006 as a hearing practice, I signed it in 2006, but they've changed the details of the payment of that contract 1,000 times at least, which makes the contract illegal. So why I say all this stuff, and this is why he's wanting me to bring it up here with this, is this. Contracts have been illegal, and they have been gently screwing with them all the way through. So when Trump kind of gives you this little intimated come in here, and he's going over, and it goes over to gold will destroy the Fed, one of the strongest statements out there, and gold-backed currency puts it under the Treasury, which happened in the second PPP loan, or second CARES Act under the PPP loans, which he sublimated the Fed underneath the Treasury. It leads us to one escapable point that I cannot even go in and find the exact evidence of how much. From 2020 to 2024, they have added maybe 10 to 13 trillion dollars to the national debt, this 34 trillion whatever number that they have. And it's basically saying they're out of money. And there is always an end point when you're living in credit, which is all the bankruptcy points that America has been through, and you don't even know it. And so the end point, they're way past the stale date. The date that this was supposed to happen in almost every time frame was 2020. 2020 was supposed to be the bankruptcy, just like 9/11 was supposed to be the bankruptcy, just like 1971 and the oil crisis in 1933. Because you're living on credit, you come to an end date where you can't do it. So guess what? It's like taking a bottle of milk out of your refrigerator, or like when we cleaned out my father-in-law's freezer, I saw stuff in there like 8 years old. Now we're throwing that stuff away because he hasn't spent any time in the freezer, right? He just goes to the refrigerator. He doesn't go to that freezer. It's that kind of stuff, guys. And so that's why they're doing it legally. So you need to look at what Derek is presenting in his book and put that together with how they've been messing with you.
What are the odds of the government shutdown in just a few days?
Right. I mean, how many times? Tell me this. That is happening Friday, the 1st. How many times are you going to do a shutdown in Joe Biden's time frame? It's like every 4 months or something stupid they do it.
The other thing is they haven't reached a deal. This is the first time they haven't reached a deal
on the Ukraine.
But then also, just a few days left, right?
Right.
So March the 4th is the original inauguration date in history, and there's supposed to be a State of the Union March the 7th, which has never happened. The State of the Union is always like early February.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm looking. I'm like I said. I'm not one of the few either, because it would be. It's like it's like the Coca-Cola, right? No matter what people think about Coke, all that, we're not talking about that, but the formula, right? You know, it's always been said, and it would be true, but I've also uh, I've had the privilege to know a CFO in my time of Coca-Cola about the formula. It's not one person that knows it. You know, it's one after all these years. You know, trademarked and branded and all those other things, sworn to secrecy, yada yada yada, all the different things. But you know, it wouldn't be a bunch of people knowing, you know, what's going on. It would be people who have also earned that trust with each other for years. And you know, generals are probably the best fraternity. If you want to look at a fraternity or a fraternal thing, that generals, they spend their whole lives in the military. I mean, we're talking about over 30 years, most of them over 30. That's their whole life in the military. There have been traitors in history, sure, but when you look at the majority, you're always going to have a traitor at every level, at everything in society, because God gave us free will, and some men and women don't do right with their free will. So none of us are exempt from experiencing any kind of traitors and hate and negativity and, you know, stress, and we all go through it. It's just a matter of how we react to it and how we learn to cope with it and how we learn to deal with it. And, you know, I've been blessed to learn a little earlier in my life than some people. And I'm trying to help people my age go, hey, this is how you deal with it. This is,
Right.
but you gotta know these things. You need to know these things. You should want to know this because it's your paycheck. If you're going to whine about it, that's like I tell people. If you're going to whine about it, complain about it, gripe about it, you need the card to do so. Here you go. Here's your whine card. Right? If that's how you want to choose to deal with it, is to whine and gripe, then at least know the card and what you're griping about. Because most people don't even know what they're whining or arguing and debating over. And it's kind of like football. I know this is real petty, but you know, Alabama and Auburn fans are daylight and dark difference, but they'll argue all day long. And 9 out of 10 Bama fans know more about their history, and they know more about Auburn's history than Auburn. And what you'll end up seeing, and then it's petty, it is a petty conversation, sure, when it comes to bigger things in life, but it's a great analogy to show. Well, I've seen Alabama fans, they'll say, Auburn fans say, well, prove it. And Alabama say, well, we got 1924, 1925, 1930, 1934, and they name all the championships. And then the Auburn fan would go, well, it doesn't matter anyway, and they try to change the subject or stop the conversation. Well, it mattered just a while ago before the proof was shown to you about the championships.
And they hated the truth.
When you say prove it and then show us where, show me the years. And so that's also what we've been doing on this level, because this level affects all of our lives.
Right.
And we show you the receipts. Here's the receipts. Well, you got to know if you don't want to read all of it like you and I mean, there ain't no telling what just me and you combined have read in our lifetime.
Right.
But especially with this, if you don't want to read all of it, and I get some people aren't readers. Well, if you don't, what I encourage people to do is look. All right. If you bought my book or if you have the documents or whatever you have, you look at our post, at least click on the link. See that the link goes where it says it goes.
Yeah.
Read a little bit of it or hit Control F. Find the key word of what we're talking about. Like if we're talking about financial or we're saying gold or whatever the key word is of the post, go over to that page. All right. Hit Control F and type in the keyword and at least see the keywords are there. Then you know that you can trust and listen to someone like Dr. Scott and I, or anybody else, Captain. I can name a bunch of people that do it, but there's key entities out there that'll show you stuff. And then you'll know who you can trust because you'll know the evidence was there. And then this is what it is. But what keeps you from being drug into the situation that our ancestors would have in the 1860s and 1870s is not listening to us, but learning it yourself.
Right.
And if you don't want to tote the news like we do, then that's fine. But what keeps and prevents this in the future from people going, well, that guy talked about it and he said this, that, and that. He showed me all the receipts. Well, it still could be someone showing you stuff and still You just listening to what they're saying, and you never click on it to prove what they're saying, kind of deal.
Right. And
And
I
then
think
we,
I
then we
think the
end up right
reality,
back where we were after all these years.
and I think the reality, though, guys, that I think that as we kind of wrap this point up here, the dog's asking to go out, but as we wrap this part up here, I'll just say this, and Derek knows this very, very well. I would say there's two military points that we can kind of point to. One is the end of the Revolutionary War. Once the Brits were officially kicked out, the people of America had to step up with responsibility. You want the sovereignty, you had to have the responsibility, which means they had to be the governors and the mayors and everything else, which is what I believe that you guys need to do. And second one, and one of my favorite dates, and I've studied this like crazy, is D-Day. June 6, 1944. That was the most secretive event in military history, including all of the spies were turned into double spies. If you go read Stephen Ambrose' Band of Brothers, and I've researched what he said in there, they didn't even have the coordinates of where they were dropping for the 101st Airborne and the 82nd Airborne. They didn't know where they were going. And they didn't even see the sand tables until 2 days before. They didn't even see the landing beaches of the Utah and Omaha until 2 days before. And these were, and you're going, well, Derek, tell me when. I'm like, if they didn't know it in June 6, 1944, and it could have been delayed because it was delayed by 1 day by weather, and it could have been delayed up to like June 23rd, 25th, something like that. And yet, if that is occurring, you're not going to know the most worldwide event out there.
But 2 points to add to that, which are brilliant on that end. 2, to give you the peace. Donald Trump sat and told you all through 2016 campaign trail, never again will we voice to the public what's going on with our military, because if you find out, guess who else finds out? So they're telling you we're taking out the enemy, and the enemy won't know we're coming because we're not going to tell them we're coming. All right? That's the one key thing there. And then, what I also like to do is go back to show way back here in you talking about the Revolutionary War. I mean, we went from 1783 to 1812, the British revolted.
Right.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that shows you that America is always a fight. All right. You cannot ever get relaxed on anything. All right. Because there's always who want, the Bible tells you, and they put it in this order for a reason. All right. To steal, kill, destroy. Right? You can't kill something if you hadn't stolen it. Like, you can't steal something or whatever. You can play this anyway, but like, if you don't have something, right? So we all have this amazing country. All right. And it's hard to fathom that there's evil out there, but there is. God told you in the Bible. There's multiple accounts of this in the Bible and in history, period. For the people out there just don't believe in the Bible, whatever. There's multiple accounts in history of evil. All right. And if we're not tough on the beginning, on the front, then we're going to end up. And to tie it back in, the second key point, that was kind of a underlay, but is this, talking about World War II, is, with President Trump. President Trump told you in 2016, I have 200 generals backing me and more to come. Do you know how many generals commanded World War II? The whole World War II. Only 14.
Oh, right.
So, 200, ladies and gentlemen, when a military personnel hears general, see, we don't hear an individual. We hear the general and their division. All right. So, and I've been to, it's right around 800, and that's world generals. It's not just U.S. generals. Like, there's a lot of people backing this. There's a lot of people operating. That's why all those foreign entities are here daily. We're talking about Peru was here the other day, Spain, Austria. Austria was flying in Alabama, an Austrian helicopter, not Australian, Austria. And it was off of like a podunk regional or municipal airport. It's not a military airport, ladies and gentlemen. They show you daily. And that's the, if you don't want to know the in-depths, I can tell you right now, you're in good hands and you're not with Allstate.
Well, I thank you so much for everything. So, by the way, guys, as we ended up here, just go over to Rattletrap, 1776. It's kind of a cool date. And what I would love you to do is just kind of pick up his book. It's not that big of a deal to pick it up, but I think it's worthwhile, and I think it will make a big difference for you. You have a picture of it? Yeah, there you go. Knight Rider rides again. And I would say that that is a powerful little book to be able to help you get some back.
It's not even that. It's only 200. I think it's 210, and it's not even all just reading. It's more like a cliff note.
Right.
It's just
a lot easier to see it.
It's not even. It's not for someone who doesn't like to read. It's not a hard read because it's more like a cliff note, and it does chronological order of the dates. So you can just pick up, or if you know more about 2016, you don't know about 2020. Whatever you need, you can skip to those entities.
Right. And I think it'll make a difference, guys. So I would really like you to do that. But thank you so much, Derek. I really appreciate your time.
Good to be here again.
All right. We'll see you.
See you soon.